One thing it has taught me is the perfectionist in me has had to go, Sarah, to make space for this, make space in myself. Perfectionist has had to go, and even progress over perfectionism. Progress doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be that.
Thank you so much, Joy, for making time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Sarah. I'm delighted to be here and chat with you. And I know we've chatted, a few times about different things.
We have. And I will introduce you as a writer, but you do wear multiple hats. So you also are an accountant. Is that right?
I'm not a formal trained accountant. I've worked in financial services in the UK. Quite specialist audit work, but with compliance, fraud work, more so than financial accounting. Yeah.
Okay.
But I left that world behind, hopefully.
To devote yourself full time to your writing.
To writing. I retrained as well. Did some formal industry recognised qualifications to copy, edit and proofread, and become freelance, self-employed, which was very exciting. But then COVID happened and everyone's lives changed. So it didn't pan out the way perhaps I planned. Perhaps the plan wasn't meant to be that way. But it led to other things, to be able to write and time to slow down and realise how burnt out I've become as well, to explore other avenues.
So as a copy editor, you work with writers, and I know you also have a writing group that you provide support to women who are interested in beginning to write. But we talk first about you being a writer, and then a little bit about your work with writers and what you've learned from that. So when did you first start writing?
I wrote sort of in a work, professional capacity, writing reports from the day's work every day, that very formal corporate speak, but there's no room for any kind of imagination or individual sort of input to it. It was, knowing how to talk the talk, basically, and present it. And as the years went by, it was becoming more and more like that. No room for any kind of personal interpretation of saying, look, guys, this client is defrauding us. And so I don't know whether, because I travelled a lot for work, my imagination is work overtime. I could create stories in my head, fully formed characters, plots, stories. And then they would disappear. And I just happened to mention this to someone sometime. And they said, you should write it down, you should record it. So I did start to jot my ideas down. That must be about, 7-8 years ago, something like that. And then I took myself on a local, just a one-day creative writing course, sort of a taster session. And I was so uplifted and amazed in myself that what I created in the day. We tried different exercises, poetry, short story, creating a character, writing a bit of dialogue, lots of little snippets of things in the day. And I was so excited and so buoyed up by it when I came away. I thought, I'm going to carry on. And the guy who ran it, John, at Right Now, I signed up for some creative writing courses, and he's now my sort of writing tutor, mentor. And just the encouragement that gives you and from feedback is so valuable, so valuable. So that's sort of where it started. And I write short stories, whatever. And then I had this idea of writing my own story, but in fiction, of sort of loss as childhood loss. So losing a parent as a child. I was a child, lost my mother. But I didn't want it to be solely, what's the word? Full of doom and gloom. And it needed to have an uplifting element somewhere in it. So it was I was around 50 when I had this realization that I'd lived for twice as long as my mother had lived. She was 25 when she passed away. And I'm thinking, that is quite a story, really. This person who actually, I don't know who she was. And it sort of gained its own momentum from there of creating a character, which is purely fictional.
I actually didn't know it wasn't true. So I only, when I got to the end, realized that it was fictional. I thought, oh, I was a bit disappointed. I was like, oh, this is so exciting because Joy's mother was a spy during the war. She crossed over into France and then she helped other people escape. And I have to admit, I was a little bit disappointed at the end.
Sorry.
No, that serves me right for not realizing it was fiction.
That is why that is at the end, a sort of a bit of like the historic background to what these amazing women, the special operations executive, did. I think that's why I put it at the end and didn't give any clues at the beginning. But I hope it's inspired people to think about, there are people who didn't have the childhood they had. It was hard, it was difficult, it was, lonely. A girl needs a mum, really, in a lot of circumstances. But more than that, I hope that sort of the historic setting, for want of a better word, some education about women, change for women as well, because it was a period of big change, the Second World War, the roles that women undertook. It wasn't just in munitions factory. I mean, the special operations executive women agents, they were saboteurs. They made bombs, that they were trained to kill people. And they were civilians. That is the amazing thing about them, that they were ordinary women, wives, daughters, sisters, and some of them were mothers. They did leave their children to go and fight and defend a cause. But it was more than that, I think, for these women to take such bold steps, was to defend freedom. I think, I think that must have been in their hearts all the way through, so that we now can tell our stories. And I don't think there's been a better time, perhaps, than now for women to tell their stories. Because I grew up in a family of men. I didn't have any female relations. My grandma died quite shortly after my mother, so I had no female. So it's always felt like a bit of a battle to be heard in some ways. And certainly my generation, we were children who were seen and not heard. And that's quite a British way as well. Children were seen and not heard in those days. So, yeah, I think it was doubly difficult to find a voice, to have a voice. And I'm not sure I had one through when I was a very young girl. But it certainly sort of found found its home now, I think, through writing and actually being able to express in words now. It's been a long journey to get here, but, and some of it self-belief that it's a possibility.
What do you think helped you acquire that self-belief and gain confidence in your voice? What was, or there may not have been a moment, it might just have been a transition into that sense of having something that you found valuable that you wanted to put in writing to share with others. But can you remember a little bit about anything you might have had to overcome to get to that point where you had that confidence?
I think that's probably a mixture of a few things. Partly working in a corporate world, which is very masculine energy, and fitting into that. But then reaching about 50 as well, which is, blimey, years are passing.
I claim it as the power age, Joy.
Yeah.
In the power age in the 50s.
But being the best time of my life, I must admit, it is, yeah. I think it growing to your own confidence. I think some it takes longer than others. Just growing into that confidence and writing a few things, I think.
Can we talk a little bit more about the group that you're working with, that you're helping support women, empowering women to write? When did you start that and why?
Partly because I'd done a few years ago, as I say, I went along to this day. I didn't know anyone and came away really feeling empowered by that. And I know some of the ladies I do dip and swim with say, said to me, I'd love to write something. I've got an idea for this. And I just thought, when I looked around locally, that there wasn't really any groups specifically for women. So I thought, I haven't done this before, completely out of my comfort zone, so probably going to be really good for me. I just thought, it's one of those things, if you wait until you're ready, you'll never do it because you'll never be ready. So, just really jumped in with 2 feet, and I'm not proclaiming to be an expert, but providing a space more so. It's not a class. The ladies who come along, just this is your space, your time. And one interesting thing that came out of the very first session, I must tell you this, is that I thought I would have some music, some sort of, gentle background music. And I actually forgot, I didn't do that. And all the ladies who attended, except one, all remarked it was the quietness of the space that the place I'm hiring to run these. It was actually the quietness and the escape that they just thoroughly enjoyed. And I thought that was a really interesting sort of lesson about listening for silence, listening out for some quietness in the world at the moment where we can be with ourselves. Some of the ladies came along with ideas, some of them absolutely not. They just thought, I'll go and see what that's about. I think I'd like to write something. It's not prescriptive at all. And they all went away, and subsequent sessions since of creating something in the day for them in a space that's very supportive. And there's something about that, I think, the power of a circle of women gathering as well, that I'm really quite taken with at the moment. And it is something that keeps coming back about the circle, women's circles. It's an ancient tradition across the globe in all cultures, isn't it? That women gathered tell stories, to pass knowledge. They were holders of wisdom and the truths of whatever that, that tribal culture or whatever it was. And where women can actually be themselves and be quite vulnerable. I must admit there's some ladies who've come along, having known one another previously, and the sharing of their experience has been quite sort of humbling to be part of, that they'll share with strangers who've then become friends.
When you first spoke about how much the women appreciated the quiet, it made me think of Virginia Woolf in A Room of One's Own. And back in her day, it was difficult to find a quiet, solitary space to be able to devote to writing, away from all of the pressures and requirements of daily living. But then when you started speaking about the communal part, I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I don't think mostly of writing as a communal activity. I think of it as a very solitary activity of the writer alone in his or her or their room writing. But then there's this aspect of sharing stories and sharing what you're writing, which mostly I think is kind of the purpose of writing, is to share it. You could write just for yourself, but I think a lot of people write to share with others. So that dynamic of solitary and communal activity with writing, I think, is very interesting.
I mean, some of the ladies don't wish to share, but some of them do. And it feels very special when they do. So for me, to have provided that space and quietness and a safe space, holding space, which I think is important.
What does that mean to you? Like, what does it mean, or what does it look like to hold a safe space for others?
I think for me, it feels special, but it feels the right thing to do. Perhaps it's providing security for them for that amount, that time, I think. Safety, security, because it's very, you expose yourself, you become very vulnerable when you share whatever you've created. As you know, it's creating that environment where they're welcome, they're valued, can speak if they wish, not if they don't. That's where they can be themselves. I think you haven't got to put on any airs and graces, and just, if you wish to share that's a real privilege for those who are part of that circle.
I guess in a way, I'm backing into that idea of refuge that I've also talked to you about before. And what it means, because that for me, that's what it means. It's creating this safe space for others to be themselves and share or not share. Yeah. And because in my day job, I create workshops and courses. And I think it's one of the things that has been missed, especially in corporate settings, and you're familiar with the corporate environment, for people to feel vulnerable in a setting where they're with their colleagues and possibly their managers in a room, and admit that maybe they don't know as much as they thought they did, or they're not as competent, or they, might share something that other people don't know about them that might make them feel less safe, is a gift to be able to create that kind of space. So I'm just very curious about, because we can't just walk into a room and say, this is a safe space for you to, it's not as simple as that. Like, I think you have to inhabit it somehow.
The fact that it's a safe space, refuge, sanctuary, whatever the word it is unspoken as well. I hadn't thought of that, but that's really interesting. You haven't got a big sign over the door saying this is a safe space. It's very unspoken, and I think for me, it has to be heart-led as well. It has to be, perhaps it is, we're giving of ourselves to create that. There's an argument to say that anything you create, you're giving of yourself, aren't you? And interestingly, it's almost as saying, if I can do it, you can entertain the thought that you could do it. I'm not saying if I can do it, you can do it. But if I can do it, I would hope that would give you some thought that, because I was a very shy child and a young woman, very, very shy. And my intention for my first book was only ever to print one copy, Sarah.
Oh, okay.
For me to go, so I could hold it and go, I've published a book. It was not really intended for public consumption, believe it or not. But it just seemed to take on a life of its own. It came to life, this. And people were interested and said, well, where can I buy it? When can I read it? Can I have a copy from you? And when I actually told people that I was writing a novel, but my intention was just for one to exist in the world. And I think that there are other people like me who probably think, but it is all about that inner critic, isn't it? It's the voice of, self-sabotage and all of those things, self-belief, and who do you think you are? Saying that you're a writer. If you write something down, you're a writer. To me, I think that's sort of exposure and being vulnerable, isn't it? Being your authentic self, because people can tell when you're not. I'm convinced of that. That's what our intuition's for.
Absolutely. And sometimes it takes a while to find that, right? Like I find that for myself, like, am I sharing too much? Am I not sharing enough? Am I sharing the right things? I mean, I try not to be too analytical about it, but I think whenever you're learning something new, you have to explore a little bit, and some things are going to work better than other things that are not going to work so well. And so I always find that interesting when people say trust your intuition, because I think if you can get a really clear link into your intuition, that's great. But if you spent 1, 2, 3, 5 decades not paying so much attention to your intuition, you actually have to kind of like test it out and find the best way to hook into it. It's a weird thing. It's the most natural thing in the world, but it's not always so natural if you've spent a lot of time not paying attention to it.
I agree totally. Yeah. It's such a common, the idea of, common sense not being that common.
Exactly.
Very rare thing. We all have our own, inner wisdom, inner teacher, intuition, we do. But finding her isn't that easy, because we've been taught to conform, fit into the boxes. I think it's the listening that takes the practice.
That's why the quiet is so important.
It is.
Can't hear when it's noisy.
Exactly. I think something else that, perhaps linked to writing and discussion is the ability to perhaps debate things. Discussion and debate, and understanding that actually, no, I don't believe what you believe. I can respect what you believe, and I can understand it, but that's not what I believe. And that's fine, which is perhaps why, discussion, debate, storytelling, all of these things, these old ways, it's back to the sharing and listening, being human. Very
That's the
human.
thing about the sharing. And I struggle with that a bit too, because I've spoken to a couple of people and I can't say that it's only art if you share it with others. It's not that you wanted to write your book and print one copy and just have it for yourself. And I think that's amazing. But I love the fact that people share what they wrote, share what they drew, share what they, what they thought about, made stuff and took pictures of it and shared it, or brought things in and had people try things out. Because I think without that sharing, well, maybe it's just selfish, because without that sharing, I'm not going to grow. So if you do your thing and you hold on to it and I never see it, I don't have the opportunity to grow from what you've done.
I agree totally with that, Sarah. That sharing creates more energy than those that put into it. It the sum being greater than its parts. That's saying, isn't it? And it comes back to you. I do believe that.
Well, these are very specific examples. So I watched Margaret Atwood's course on Masterclass. And so she talked about the art of writing and the different things that she does. Yes. And one of the things that she talked about is that she'll have this big board and she'll map out what's happening to the characters over time, because the story isn't necessarily following the linear program. But that's how she keeps track of, so that was 5 years ago that happened. And then she maps it all out. And I remember watching that and thinking, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. But it just was a theoretical concept for me because I've never written fiction. So I didn't get it. And then my mom wrote a novel this year. And then I read your novel around the same time. And I was like, both of you were doing that thing where you were changing character perspectives and changing time and going back and forth. And I thought, how do they keep this all straight? Like, how do they decide the flow? And how did you know that you're going to go back to Marianne? And when is it Winnie? And the same for my mother's piece. And then I thought, oh, but that's the Margaret Atwood thing. And I was like, I wonder if Joy has a big poster on her wall where she mapped it out or not. And I've always wanted to ask you about how you structured.
I actually did.
There we go. Okay.
I had a long piece in a spare one of the spare bedroom, a long piece of wallpaper, backing paper, lining paper.
Yeah.
So attached that to the wall, and then I had all these titles of the chapters. And they were stuck all along, so I could just move them along. This time I'll make it far easier. It'll just be Post-its so that you can just move them. Because there was two characters as well. It was coming back to balance. It needed to be balanced between these two characters, and to interweave the two stories so that it made sense. So not saying something too soon. So thinking, that's in chapter such and such, so that'll have to come later. Yeah, Margaret Atwood did that.
Yeah.
That's reassuring.
Oh, it's so thank you for so it's because you shared your book and it put it right in front of my face, and then I saw it in action.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how, what process you had used in the back end, but still I found that I read differently maybe now. And maybe I read yours and my mom's books differently because I know you. So I read differently than I read a story of someone I don't know. I don't know why it would be different, but I pay maybe less attention, but because I know you and I know my mother, obviously, I'm reading with a different, it's almost because I'm like, oh, real people wrote these. This is accessible to me because these are people like me. I know these people, they wrote, I could maybe figure out how to do this if I learned from them in a way that authors famous authors that I'll never meet have written, and it's out of my league in a way. So Margaret Atwood's doing it. I mean, what are the hopes for me to do it? But if Joy and my mom are doing it and they figured out how to do it, maybe that comes back to the women's circle of writers where you're setting this example of this is accessible. And like you said, you do it. Maybe other people can do it or will do it differently than you do, but it makes it accessible to all of us.
And entertain the thought that it might be, I think, is more the message that, this could be a possibility for you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Joy. It was really, really gracious of you to spend the time and talk with me today.
As always, Sarah, it's a pleasure.